Here, let's go to David Cohn, doing a great job working with Ken Singleton, probably breathing a sigh of relief he doesn't have to work with Michael in Cleveland. Joins us here on the Michael K. Show. It's Don LaGreca and John McEnroe. David, how are you?
Hey, Johnny Mac, how you doing?
David, good to talk to you. Been a long time.
It has been. Good to talk to you.
You miss Michael in Cleveland?
You said it, not me. I can't say what you just said. So, I
yeah, you can. Go ahead.
You may not be able to say it, but you certainly can feel it.
No, we miss Michael. He deserves a vacation. That's good. Get him out and freshen him up a little bit.
All right, so this stuff on Tanaka, we don't know yet, but flying all the way to Seattle to get checked up by Dr. Ahmad, it just doesn't look good. I mean, what's your feeling on whether Tommy John surgery could possibly be on the horizon?
Yeah, Don, the waiting's the hardest part, right? Usually you get the medical report and you get a sort of a quick diagnosis, but with this situation, it's a little different. You've got to fly to Seattle. I think every orthopedic surgeon that's anybody's out in Seattle right now, so he's in the right place. You're going to get a lot of eyeballs on that MRI, but it's just waiting to hear the news. You can't help but worry. He's such a huge part of the Yankees. Where would they be without him? He gives them a chance, a fighter's chance. And if it's worse, if the worst news comes out and this is going to take a long time or he's going to be out for an extended period of time, then the Yankees really have to go back to the drawing board.
David, when you watched Tanaka pitch when he was in Japan before he came here, was there concern in your eyes as a pitcher that the way he threw his splitter, how hard he threw it, how many innings he had already pitched in Japan, that was going to be an issue when he came to New York?
Yeah, I really wasn't that worried. I think the problem is that in Japan he only pitches once a week, so he's used to a lot more recovery time. And Johnny, as you know, and really any professional athlete, it's really about the recovery time. If you go out there and you're fatigued, that's when you're prone to more injury. So I think the workload over here probably was the most important adjustment for him. And more recently, he's been going on short days rest. So this is the first time he's really been tested with the American-style five-man rotation, and sure enough, some problems have started to arise, and now we got to wait and see how bad they are.
Wait. So you say in Japan, is that because of the arm? They're worried about the arm. He only pitched once a week.
Yeah, that's their style over there. They use more pitchers. They don't have as an extensive schedule as we do in Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball, we play 162 games in 184 days. It's not that grueling of a schedule in Japan, so that allows them to rest their pitchers more. And it was almost as if he pitched once a week, every Saturday or every Friday night. It was like once every 7 days on average when he pitched, as opposed to once every 5 days. And that's probably the biggest adjustment, I think, for Japanese pitchers coming over to America. He's still 25 years old. I don't think the splitter causes as much stress on the arm as some people say. Johnny, I threw a splitter, and I never had any elbow problems. I'm not so sure that the splitter is the problem. I think it's more the workload and the recovery time in between starts. It's probably the biggest adjustment for him.
Now, David, I know that the Yankees have a lot of veterans and guys that have been there and done that. But if we find out that he's done for the year, never mind how do you replace a potential 20-game winner in your rotation, but what does that psychologically do to the team, knowing that with him pitching as good as anybody in Major League Baseball, you were only a 500 team. And if he's ripped from this roster, does Joe Girardi have to do some psychological work to his roster?
Well, yes, everybody's going to do some psychological work up and down. The whole organization is going to have to sort of do some soul-searching at that point. You're right, Don. I mean, when Tanaka pitched, they were 8 games over 500, and when he didn't pitch, on the days he didn't pitch, they were almost 8 or 9 games below 500. So he is the difference. He's the one that really has kept them in contention at this point in the season. So without him on the roster for an extended period of time, it's a whole different team, a whole different look. Then the organization's got some deciding to do on whether they go out and try to replace him, say, with somebody like a Cole Hamels, if he becomes available with Philadelphia, or another frontline pitcher somewhere. And then you've got to give up a big price of young minor league talent. And as we know, the Yankees minor league system, while doing better and has shown some signs of life on the lower levels, doesn't have a stockpile of prospects to deal from. So that puts the organization in a precarious position to have to make some decisions on whether to try to reload or to try to go out and try to trade some of those prospects and get a frontline starter.
David, I know when I grew up that pitchers pitch, I believe, once every 4 days. I'm looking in your 1988 season when you went 20-3 and had 8, is that right, 8 complete games? 231 innings pitched. Were you pitching once every 4 or 5 days? Was that once every 5 days then?
Yes, that was once every 5 days. We were on a 5-man rotation. And, Johnny, a lot of the old-school pitching coaches think that the pitchers don't throw enough nowadays, that maybe in the minor leagues we're babying them too much. And if you look at a lot of the minor leagues throughout all the organizations, most of their starting pitchers are only allowed to go 5 innings. They're really protective of the young pitchers now because it's such a hot commodity. They're so valuable, and the price tag on frontline pitchers is so high that they really want to protect them. And so a lot of people feel like maybe they're babying the pitchers a little too much in the minor leagues, and maybe they need to throw more. I'm not so sure that's the case. I think there's a lot of variables involved. Johnny, I see a lot of pitchers nowadays with different styles of pitching, a lot of manipulation of the baseball, a lot of cutters, a lot of sinkers, circle changes that turn into screwballs, turning over the ball. So I see a lot more stress in the elbows just based on style. A lot of pitchers are trying to make the ball move as opposed to Doc Gooden back in the day or Nolan Ryan back in the day throwing 4-seam fastballs, more of a true spin, more of a natural arm action as opposed to a manipulation at the end of the pitch. And a lot of pitching coaches think that might be part of the problem, too. It's just stylistically how some of these pitchers are throwing the ball.
When was the pitch count come into vogue in a big way? You hear about 100 pitches or maybe a couple more. How many pitches a game were you, those years? How many do you go? Was that even an issue?
It was not an issue. We barely kept track. Johnny, I used to pitch regularly in the 130 range, and I had one game with the Mets where I threw 166 pitches in a 9-inning game. So, I'm not saying that, hey, we should do it the way, I did it back then. I'm not saying I was any better than those guys. It was just a different era back then, a different style of pitching. There's a lot of variables involved. It's debatable on what's going on in the minor leagues, whether these pitchers are being babied too much or whether it's the style of pitching that's causing all these elbow injuries. But nonetheless, something's happening out there that used to didn't happen a lot, 20, 30 years ago.
Now, you mentioned you don't think the slider causes this injury, but let me ask you this. If you are feeling pain and you consistently throw it, could you then maybe make situations worse?
Absolutely. I think all athletes in any sport are prone to injury when you're fatigued, when your body's broken down a little bit. Then compensation comes into play where, if one muscle's fatigued, then you compensate in another area of your body, and then you compromise your natural delivery or your natural athletic move, and that's when you leave yourself susceptible to injury. So without a doubt, when pitchers get fatigued and they're still trying to snap off and manufacture spin on their pitches, you are definitely at a higher risk level for injury.
And, Dave, just a theory, you wonder, he threw that fastball to Napoli. You wonder if that was because maybe he's feeling it throwing the slider, because it didn't make any sense him throwing that fastball that lost that game on that Saturday night, if you remember, at Yankee Stadium against the Red Sox. You wonder then whether there was something going on even as far as back as a week ago.
Talk about overanalyzing, Don.
Man.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think Tanaka shook off Brian McCann to get to that pitch, so maybe he just had a feeling about a certain pitch. Sometimes pitchers just outthink themselves on the mound, and you try to throw a pitch the hitter's not looking for, and sometimes it's the wrong guess. I think it's probably more along those lines as far as Tanaka goes. We can break it down any which way you want, but I think there's a lot of variables with Japanese pitchers coming over to America. One is the workload, the once a week that they're usually allowed to pitch. The other is the baseball. The baseball in Japan actually is a little smaller with a little higher seams, and I know talking to several Japanese pitchers over the course of the years, including Hideo Nomo, that when they first came over to America, they had a little trouble adjusting to the baseball. The baseball's a little bigger in America. It's a little slicker. The seams aren't as high. So guys who do throw splitters have felt a little more stress just adjusting to the different types of baseball. Much less the mounds are a little stickier in the American game. They're a little harder. Japanese mounds, the dirt's a little softer. The baseball's a little easier to manipulate. So there are several adjustments that Tanaka's had to go through this first half. So it's not really a surprise that maybe at this point he's experiencing a little discomfort in his elbow. The key is did they catch it in time? Every athlete, Johnny Mack, as you know, you've got to know the difference between pain and injury. And if you're on that cusp of injury, then you really need to know your body and step away before the injury happens. So let's hope that's the case with Tanaka, that he said something soon enough before it did become a potential Tommy John surgery candidate.
Have a good game tonight, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Good deal. Good to have. Thanks for having me on, guys. Good
David, good talking to you.